I talked a little bit about it the other day, but all apologetics is designed to strengthen the church and prepare us to go out and better share the gospel. And our additional focus is to launch the next generation of Christian apologists and thought leaders. And in that vein, we have a wonderful young lady that's going to be joining us, and let me tell you a little bit about her. This is Vivien White, and Vivien is a 17-year-old. 17 is, I don't know about you, but I was not doing any of this kind of stuff at 17. I won't tell you what I was doing at 17 years old, but it wasn't this. So, 17-year-old high school senior from Indio, California. She's a nationally ranked speech and debate competitor whose dream is to use her skills to speak boldly and change the world for Christ. And when she's not writing apologetic speeches or prepping for her next debate, she's reading, crocheting, practicing piano, and isn't too old to play make-believe with her 5 younger siblings. And please welcome Vivien White.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm so excited that I get to start the day with you today. As was previously mentioned, my name's Vivien White, and for the past 6 years of my life, I've been a competitor in STOA USA, which is a national speech and debate organization for private Christian homeschoolers. And by far my favorite event is Apologetics. And the way this event works in our league is the STOA National Board will release a list of 84 questions each year. They could range from things like, what does it mean that God is triune and why does this matter? To respond to this quote by Karl Marx that religion is the opium of the people. And so you have to prepare for as many of those questions as you can because you don't know which ones you're going to be addressing at the tournament. But something that I've noticed happens to me in my life sometimes is I get so focused on researching and internalizing and researching for an hour on these different questions just so that I can regurgitate the information at my competition. But apologetics, by definition, is the defense of your faith. So it's not just something to be learned, it's meant to be applied, discussed, and debated. For example, last year, I only studied about an hour on the evidence for God in our physical universe. And little did I know how God would be using that research when I went to Italy last summer with 41 high schoolers. And I ended up having a 30-minute conversation with a boy who was a Buddhist on that trip about the evidence for God in our physical universe. And if you're sitting here today thinking, Vivien, I don't really like controversial conversations that much. I don't really know if I'm equipped to do that. Well, that's the hint for all of us to step outside of our comfort zone and try having those controversial conversations. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is that if we really want to change the world for Christ, then it's up to us to have the kinds of conversations necessary to spread the truth. And we're going to look at this today in a few simple ideas. We're going to look at the problems, the solutions, and why this matters. So what are the problems facing modern Christianity today? Well, I think by far the most overarching problem is that as a culture, we have started to reject having controversial conversations. And as surprising as this sounds, statistics actually backs up that claim. According to Jacob Ruda writing for ABC News in 2021, quote, a recent study surveyed 1,300 participants. It found that 74% of those surveyed mostly feared speaking out about political and social issues, end quote. The article went on to address how this fear of controversial conversations has just crippled our society. 65% of people choose to remain silent in conversations rather than speak their mind. 47% avoid people with different views than them. And 39% simply fake agreement for the sake of the moment. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, all of us have been guilty of this before. But why are we so afraid of these controversial conversations? Well, I think there are a few root issues. And one of the first is that as a society, we've embraced the philosophy of multiculturalism. And not multiculturalism in the sense that we welcome all cultures, but that we demand that all cultures be treated equally. That there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as absolute truth, only your own truth. So anytime you try to speak out on your beliefs and your ideas and why they're better than someone else's, you're labeled as intolerant and unloving. But another issue is that many Christians lack a deep understanding of their faith and of theology. I know many Christians have said to me before, "Oh, Vivien, theology is a secondary issue because it creates disunity among believers." But theology is not a secondary issue when we're talking about someone's salvation or relationship with God. And yet we still, as a church community, reject these controversial conversations. A third and final issue is technology. I read a recent statistic by the Fortune magazine that the average teenager, my age, spends about 8.5 hours a day on their screens. That's the equivalent of a 40-hour work week. And the result of this is that we lack having controversial conversations in our society. And most importantly, there's a lack of cross-generational conversations. Kids aren't asking their grandpa about their testimony because they're scrolling on social media, and adults have no connection with my generation. So the result is that there's a huge maturity and wisdom gap in my generation. So how do we solve these problems, and what are the solutions? Well, solution number one is to not be afraid to stand up for the truth. Don't get bamboozled into staying silent on your beliefs because somebody labels you as intolerant and unloving. See, the Bible tells us that it's our job to be intolerant of the world and intolerant of sin, but to point this out in a loving and gracious manner. And there is absolute truth in the world, as we all know, which can be found in the Bible. And sharing that truth about the gospel is the most loving thing you could ever do for somebody. Solution number two is to take the time to research your beliefs. You're already, by being here and listening to esteemed apologists, doing a great job and having a big step in the right direction. But think about it this way. If you were having a conversation with your neighbor and they asked you about the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, or told you that why should they read the Bible because it's just another religious conspiracy, would you have an answer? Would you be able to communicate your answer in a clear and concise way? And if not, that's okay, because it's not everybody's gift to speak boldly. That's something that everybody has to learn and has to practice. So my challenge to you is, when you have a few minutes in the day, read theology books, listen to theological podcasts, watch YouTube videos, and attend conferences like this. And most importantly, practice having controversial conversations, which leads us to our final solution. Turn off your phones and take out your AirPods. And yes, that applies to adults, not just to kids. If we want to have cross-generational conversations and be forced to be uncomfortable in our beliefs, that's something we have to practice, and that can only be done by unplugging ourselves from technology and plugging ourselves into the people around us. For example, when you're at the grocery store or in an airplane, have a conversation with the person next to you. Ask them questions about their life. But why does all of this matter, and how should this change the way that we think and act? Well, according to, I was about to quote instead of read a Bible verse. Ephesians 4:25 in the Bible tells us, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of us speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another." See, if our beliefs are worth having, then they're worth sharing and defending as well. Many Christians want to see a change in our religious landscape and our political landscape, but they're unwilling to start with something as simple as changing their own lives and habits. Or as a Hobby Lobby sign said so well, everyone wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change the toilet paper roll. See, if we really want to see a change in the church, in our relationships, and in the world, then we need to start small. And if we really believe that the truth can set people free, then there's nothing more important than those brief but personal interactions that we have with people on a day-to-day basis. As lawyer, pastor, and politician Chuck Colson said so well, culture's most profoundly changed not by the efforts of huge institutions, but by individual persons. See, I had no idea that by taking just 1 hour to research on the evidence for God in our physical universe, that I'd be able to apply that and witness to that boy that I met on my Italy trip, or that it would lead me to speaking here in front of you today. And maybe someday, that'll be you. What I hope that we all remember from the end of this conversation is that God will use our obedience and our commitment and our hard work for him if we are open and willing to take the opportunities that he sends our way. We have the chance to come together like we're doing right now and change the world for Christ, defending our faith one day, one conversation, one question, one person at a time. The question is, will we? Thank you.